People don't say, they leak the art of reading. People teaches you to catch those leaks, the tiny gestures, the hidden rhythms, the honest signals behind polite words. This summary will turn you from guesser into observer, from awkward asker into magnetic conversationalist. Stay with me till the end. One skill here will change every conversation you ever have. If you want more of these deep dive book breakdowns, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Chapter 1. The Signal. Behind the smile. People rarely tell the full truth with words. They leak it with posture, micro-movements, and timing. The first chapter trains you to spot those leaks by turning the abstract skill of reading people into a concrete set of signal detection habits you can practice immediately. Start by learning to observe without interpreting. Observation is the raw material. Note jaw tension, blink rate, micro shifts in weight before you rush to a story about personality or motive. The human face and body produce thousands of micro movements per minute. Your job is to notice patterns, not isolate a single twitch, and declare a verdict. The chapter introduces the three-stage loop: notice, cluster, hypothesize. Notice means gather as many neutral facts as you can about posture, hands, eye contact, breathing, and vocal tone. Cluster means group these facts into a coherent pattern. Are the hands guarded while the voice quickens? Do micro smiles flicker while the eyes remain flat? Hypothesize means form a tentative explanation and then seek confirmatory or disconfirmatory evidence. Never treat a hypothesis as truth. Treat it as a lead. A large portion of this chapter is devoted to smiling because it's both a universal social tool and a notorious liar. Genuine smiles, Duchenne smiles, engage the orbicularis oculi muscle around the eyes and produce crow's feet. They emerge quickly and fade naturally. Polite smiles, on the other hand, often involve only the mouth and can be static or delayed. Look for smile timing. A smile that appears before an expression of feeling is often strategic. A smile that follows spontaneous laughter is more likely authentic. Beyond the face, posture, and orientation, tell a story of approach and avoidance. People who lean toward you, uncross their arms, and mirror your breathing are signaling comfort and connection. Those who angle their bodies slightly away, maintain closed limb positions, or create distance with props, a bag, a chair, are signaling caution. The chapter shows you a quick, ethical test. Subtly adjust your distance and see if the other person closes the gap or increases it. This small experiment reveals their current relational preference without demanding words. Voice is another rich channel. Pay attention to pitch, tempo, and breath control. Excitement raises pitch and quickens tempo. Controlled breathing and a steady lower register convey calm and authority. Sudden shifts, staccato speech, mid-sentence pauses, throat clearing, often mark cognitive load or discomfort. Combine these vocal cues with facial and postural data to avoid false positives. Importantly, the chapter teaches you to read clusters across time, not snapshots. One crossed arm in a cold room is less meaningful than a repeated pattern of closed limbs, drained affect, and shortened responses across a conversation. Chapter 2. Eyes, Pupils, and the Currency of Attention. The eyes are the most honest instruments we have when you know how to listen. Chapter 2 focuses narrowly on ocular signals because the eyes reveal attention, affect, and intent in ways that are subtle yet tractable. Begin with directionality, gaze toward you, gaze to the left, gaze up. Each pattern carries a functional meaning that varies with context but reliably maps to types of mental activity. For example, sustained eye contact typically indicates interest or assertiveness. Rapid shifts away can signal avoidance, cognitive processing, or simply cultural discomfort. The chapter explains how to differentiate cultural norms from individual signals. In some societies, prolonged eye contact is rude. In others, it is a sign of engagement. Always anchor a gaze inference to the cultural baseline. Pupillary response is a physiological window into cognitive and emotional state. Pupils dilate under arousal, positive or negative, when the brain registers novelty, interest, or mental effort. Conversely, constricted pupils often accompany low arousal or aversive boredom. While modern cameras sometimes distort pupil reading, real-world practice, observing relative change rather than absolute size, gives you usable information. Microsaccades and blink rate also matter. People under cognitive load blink less frequently and have more microsaccades. Those experiencing anxiety often have increased blink rates. Rapid blinking coupled with tightened jaw and shifted feet is a cluster that suggests stress or discomfort. Eye-accessing cues, the direction people look when retrieving memories or constructing answers, can be informative if you track them across time and pair them with the content of their speech. For instance, looking up and to the right while telling a story often indexes visual construction, whereas looking down and to the left may indicate internal dialogue or recall. Don't treat these as lie detector rules. Treat them as clues in a larger puzzle. The chapter also covers pupil mirroring. People who genuinely connect often unconsciously synchronize blink rates and gaze patterns. Mirroring is a sign of rapport. It's subtle and slow to develop, but when it appears, social access deepens. Chapter 3. The hand speaks loudest. Gestures, touch, and territory. Hands are behavioral megaphones. When someone gestures, they export thought into motion. Chapter 3 turns your attention to the hands because gestures encode emphasis, emotional valence, and interpersonal intent in high resolution. Begin by cataloging gesture families: illustrators, emblems, regulators, and adapters. Illustrators accompany speech and amplify meaning, pointing, slicing in the air, or using the palm to show scale. Emblems have cultural consensus, thumbs up, a wave, and can be read quickly, but must be interpreted culturally. Regulators control conversational flow: hand raises to claim floor, palms outward to de-escalate, or a forward loom to signal assertion. Adapters are self-soothing, rubbing, fidgeting, clasping, often indicative of stress or nervousness. The most informative gestures are those that are spontaneous and asymmetrical. Deliberate, rehearsed gestures often lack diagnostic power. For example, someone who says "I'm confident" but keeps their hands hidden under the table is sending a contradictory signal worth noting. The chapter emphasizes the value of sequencing. Observe whether gestures precede, coincide with, or lag speech. Gestures that occur prior to speech often reveal pre-verbal plans or impulses. Those that lag may be after-the-fact rationalizations. Touch is covered carefully because it's a powerful but ethically fraught channel. A light, context-appropriate touch on the forearm to emphasize camaraderie can establish warmth and trust when both parties are comfortable. But touch also enacts power relations: who initiates touch, where it occurs, and how it's reciprocated tells you about dominance, intimacy, and permission. Territorial behaviors, how people arrange objects, take up space, and defend proximity, are hands connected to a broader body practice. Someone who spreads belongings across a table or opens their jacket to increase torso space is claiming territory and signaling comfort and entitlement. Conversely, compactness, folded arms, guarded possessions, signals caution. The chapter provides a real-world drill. During a coffee meeting, map the other person's gestures across 10 minutes without interpreting. Afterwards, group them into the gesture families and see which clusters predict the person's conversational positivity or guardedness. The final lesson is about congruence. Gestures must be read against voice and face for meaning. A hand that emphatically opens, while the voice softens, may be trying to manage an emotional contradiction. Effective readers watch for multiple streams, weigh them, and prioritize patterns over single cues. When you respect the hand as an honest narrator of inner states, your sensitivity to nuance in conversation deepens dramatically. Chapter 4. Vocal truths. Tone, tempo, and the unsaid words carry content. The voice carries credibility. This chapter explores how tone, tempo, volume, and prosody communicate layers of meaning often ignored by literal listeners. Start with 3 vocal axes: affect, emotion, authority, confidence, and control, composure. Affect shows up in pitch range and warmth. Authority shows as steady, lower pitch, and decisive cadence. Control manifests in even breath patterns and measured pauses. Fast talkers can be enthusiastic or anxious, disambiguate by pairing speed with breath control and facial tension. Slower speech often signals deliberation, tiredness, or the desire to persuade. Volume is context-sensitive. Raised volume in a noisy room is adaptive. Raised volume in a quiet space can be an assertion of dominance. Micropauses matter. Strategic silence before an answer signals deliberation and can draw a listener's attention. Frustrated people often truncate pauses and rush to fill space. Prosody, how pitch and stress vary across phrases, carries emotional shading. A flat monotone often reduces credibility and signals disengagement. A voice with melodic variability tends to feel more genuine and engaged. Importantly, listen for markers of cognitive load, filled pauses, sentence repairs, and increased disfluency often indicate that the speaker is constructing rather than recalling, useful when you're gauging certainty. Deceptive behavior doesn't have a single vocal fingerprint but clusters. Higher pitch, increased speech errors, and delayed responses should raise caution when combined with other incongruent signals. The chapter includes an exercise: record a short, prepared elevator pitch, and then a spontaneous story. Listen for differences in tone, where you speed up, where breath tightens, and which moments feel anchored. Practice adjusting tempo and breath to increase perceived authority and calm. Finally, the chapter underscores ethics. Amplifying or mimicking vocal patterns to manipulate is unethical. Instead, use this sensitivity to meet people effectively, calm anxious speakers, or detect when more safety or space is needed. Voice is the medium of emotional truth. Those who listen beyond words discover the texture of intent and the rhythm of honesty. Chapter 5. Clusters, Context, and the Science of Judgment. No single cue proves anything. Chapter 5 pulls earlier lessons together into a disciplined method for making accurate social judgments. Cluster cues weigh context and calibrate for individual baseline. The first rule is clustering. Only when multiple signals from different channels align do you increase confidence. A single fidget might be cold. A fidget plus tightened jaw and short answers suggests stress. The second rule is context. Environment, history, and cultural norms reshape meanings. Averted gaze at a job interview differs from averted gaze in a funeral. Always ask yourself, what norms are active here? The third rule is baseline calibration. People have idiosyncratic default behaviors. Some folks naturally avoid eye contact due to shyness or cultural upbringing. Assuming deception without a baseline risks catastrophic error. Build the baseline by observing silently for a short period or by asking neutral questions and noting default responses. The chapter offers a pragmatic decision architecture. Observe for 1 to 3 minutes, list neutral facts, cluster them into cross-channel patterns, check context for alternative explanations, and test the top hypothesis with a low-risk question or behavioral nudge. For example, if you hypothesize tension, ask a mildly disarming question about logistics and observe whether the other relaxes. If they do, the tension was situational. The chapter also examines common bias traps, confirmation bias, projection, and the halo effect, and gives corrective practices. To avoid confirmation bias, deliberately look for disconfirming evidence. To avoid projection, separate your emotional reactions from observed behavior by asking, is this my feeling or their signal? To counter halo effects, evaluate discrete behaviors rather than general impressions. Another key section covers ethical skepticism. Social reading is probabilistic, not moral judgment. Use insights to increase empathy and reduce friction, not to outmaneuver or exploit. The chapter closes with a competence drill. Over a week, practice the observation cycle in different settings, work, cafe, family, and record predictions against outcomes. Rate your accuracy and adjust calibration rules. Over time, you'll develop a personal diagnostic map, patterns that reliably predict listening posture, openness, or guardedness for the populations you most commonly meet. Reading people well is not infallible. It's a skill of probability and humility. When you cluster signals thoughtfully, weigh context, and respect baselines, your social intelligence becomes a practical tool for clearer communication, safer boundaries, and deeper connection. Chapter 6. The Rhythm of Interaction. Timing, turn-taking, and conversational. Flow conversation is a dance, and timing is the rhythm that makes it beautiful or awkward. Chapter 6 trains you to hear and shape that rhythm so you can lead conversations without dominating them, follow without losing presence, and repair flow when it collapses. Start by listening for conversational tempo, the average length of turns, the speed of topic shifts, and the density of content within each turn. Different settings have distinct tempos. A negotiation may be slow and deliberate with long pauses and calibrated reveals, while small talk is fast, repetitive, and low stakes. Calibrate your behavior to the room. The first practical skill is turn-taking sensitivity. Notice micro pauses that invite responses and the tiny inhalations or eyebrow raises that signal a desire to speak. People who are adept at social timing do two things. They respect the implicit floor holder signals, and they use minimal signals to indicate availability, leaning forward, opening palms, and brief eye contact. Conversely, people who monopolize attention often ignore these cues, leading to friction. The chapter offers a short drill in a small group conversation. Practice the 2-beat rule. After your sentence, pause for 2 beats, a brief count, and only speak again if no one else has taken the floor. This pause invites participation and avoids conversational overriding. Next, learn the art of rhythmic mirroring. Match the other person's tempo subtly to create rapport. If a partner speaks slowly and deliberately, slow your replies and allow breath space. If they speak quickly, increase your tempo slightly but maintain clarity. Mirroring tempos signals alignment but avoid mimicry. Keep the match subtle and kind. Topic management is the next dimension, how topics are introduced, deepened, and closed. Skilled readers watch for topical hooks, phrases that indicate willingness to deepen, that reminds me of, and for exit signals, glances at watches, shorter responses, or repeated references to unrelated obligations. Chapter 11. Influence and Persuasion, Ethical Strategies for Moving People. Influence is the purposeful shaping of choices while preserving autonomy. Chapter 11 presents ethical persuasion techniques that respect agency yet increase the chance that others choose options aligned with mutual benefit. Begin with the principle of alignment. Craft proposals that map clearly onto the listener's stated interests and values. Ask diagnostic questions to surface priorities, then frame your suggestion as a solution to those priorities. Use evidence and narrative in tandem. A concise metric demonstrates efficacy. A short user story shows emotional impact. Scarcity and timing are persuasive when truthful. Limited time offers or highlighting real capacity constraints create urgency without deceit. Reciprocity fuels compliance, offers small, genuine favors or valuable information first, and watch cooperative behavior rise. Social proof is powerful. Testimonials, endorsements, and peer examples reduce uncertainty. Use them honestly and contextually. Authority increases persuasion when the authority is relevant and credible. Leverage credentials or third-party validation rather than asserting dominance. The chapter emphasizes framing effects, present choices as gains, what they get, rather than losses, and structure default options to guide better decisions. People stick with defaults, so design them for welfare. For negotiations, anchor early with a strong but reasonable starting position, and then use calibrated concessions tied to reciprocal gains. Ask questions that make the other party articulate the benefits of your proposal. Self-persuasion is often more effective than external argument. The ethics thread runs throughout. Avoid manipulative tactics like gaslighting, emotional exploitation, or false scarcity. Effective persuaders build repeatable relationships. Manipulation burns networks. Finally, practice short persuasion scripts in low-stakes contexts. Invite someone to a lunch with a clear benefit, present a small ask with social proof, and reflect on outcomes. Influence practiced with transparency and reciprocity becomes a tool for cooperative progress rather than coercive advantage. Chapter 12. Cultural Fluency, Reading People Across Context and Norms. People are embedded in cultures that shape meanings. Chapter 12 trains you to recognize cultural frames so you don't misread signals or unintentionally offend. Begin by mapping cultural dimensions relevant to your context, directness versus indirectness, high versus low context, communication, power distance, and norms about personal space. In high-context cultures, many meanings are implicit and rely on shared background. Readers must attend to subtle gestures, silence, and relational licenses. In low-context cultures, direct verbal content dominates meaning. Power distance tells you how status signals will be displayed and whether open disagreement is acceptable. Proxemics vary widely. Comfortable personal distances in one culture may be invasive in another. The chapter recommends a simple practice. Before entering a cross-cultural interaction, spend 5 minutes learning 1 or 2 key etiquette rules and 1 conversational taboo to avoid. Observe before acting. Watch how locals greet, joke, and use eye contact. Use humility phrases that acknowledge potential cultural gaps. "I'm learning your norms, please correct me," which signal respect and reduce friction. Recognize that within culture variation exists. Age, class, and subcultures modify norms, so avoid stereotyping. When you're uncertain, ask open, respectful questions about preferences rather than assuming. Cultural fluency also includes organizational cultures. Each company, club, or community has its rituals, symbols, and unspoken rules. Rapid immersion tactics, shadowing, asking for a cultural brief, and observing initial meetings accelerate alignment. Finally, practice translating signals across frames. When you interpret a cue, ask how it would be expressed in your own culture, then invert that mapping to test alternative meanings. Cultural fluency is humility in action. It expands your accuracy, reduces faux pas, and deepens connection across the diverse worlds you'll encounter. Chapter 13. The Ethics of Reading, Consent, Privacy, and Psychological Safety. Skill without ethics harms. Chapter 13 anchors the entire craft in consent, privacy, and psychological safety. Start by recognizing boundaries. People have a right to mental privacy and to construct their own narratives without intrusive analysis. Before using reading skills in intimate or vulnerable contexts, gain consent implicitly by creating safety. Explain your intent, invite sharing, and never weaponize observations. In professional settings, ensure transparency. If you're using behavioral insights for evaluation or selection, disclose methods and allow for rebuttal. Protect sensitive information rigorously. Treat observations as data that could harm if misused. The chapter introduces the consent checklist. Is the setting appropriate? Is the person in a vulnerable state? Would sharing my observation help or harm? And do I have authorization to act on this data? When in doubt, err on the side of preserving agency. Psychological safety is not only an individual obligation, but a design principle. Create spaces where people can disclose without fear of judgment or punitive consequences. In leadership contexts, avoid covert reading used to manipulate team behavior. Instead, use insights to ask supportive questions and co-create solutions. The chapter also addresses power asymmetry. Readers in positions of authority and must be especially cautious to avoid exploiting trust. Ethical readers prioritize dignity. They use skills to reduce misunderstanding, facilitate consent, and enable autonomy. Finally, cultivate personal ethical routines, regular reflection on how you used insights, seeking third-party accountability, and committing to repair harm if misuse occurs. When reading people is governed by consent and care, it becomes a tool for empathy and collaboration rather than surveillance and control. Mastery includes moral responsibility. The best readers are the ones who make others safer, not smaller. Chapter 14. Reading People Remotely, Digital Signals and Virtual Presence. The landscape of human signaling has shifted. Much of our social life now happens through screens, and the art of reading people must adapt to pixels, timestamps, and curated personas. This chapter teaches precise methods for interpreting digital behavior: email tone, response latency, message length, emoji use, video posture, camera framing, and the subtle choreography of online presence, so you can make reliable inferences without overreaching. Begin by acknowledging the medium. Digital communication compresses and often distorts cues that are abundant in face-to-face encounters. Where a pause in person is filled with breath and micro-expression, a delayed reply on email may be affected by context, time zones, workload, or deliberate wait strategy. So treat latency as signal only when you can control for alternatives. The foundational principle here is triangulation across channels. Combine what you see on video with what you read in messages and the behavioral patterns over time. For example, someone who shows steady eye contact and open posture during a video call but habitually responds late to asynchronous tasks may be comfortable in synchronous collaboration, yet less reliable for independent execution. These patterns inform how you design shared work. Video-specific cues are rich. Camera angle signals formality. Eye-level frames feel conversational. Low angles can feel domineering. Background choices reveal values or constraints. Bookshelves may project expertise. Blurred backgrounds indicate privacy preferences. And physical framing, how much of the torso appears, says something about relational distance. Pay attention to motion rhythm, fidgeting in frame, consistent off-camera glances or shifting weight often indicate distraction or discomfort even when the face is composed. Vocal texture over VoIP has its quirks. Compression alters tone, and latency can cause overlapping speech patterns. If you notice an unusual tempo or clipped responses, probe gently rather than infer malice. Text-based signals deserve their own taxonomy. Response time patterns are diagnostic when measured against a baseline. A person who usually replies within hours but suddenly takes days may be signaling disengagement or a temporary bandwidth issue. Consistent slow replies combined with reduced message length and fewer proactive updates predict lower future engagement. Message length and content structure are telling. Concise messages with preemptive questions that indicate conscientiousness. Long, rambling replies may signal enthusiasm, poor clarity, or a need to ventilate emoji, and punctuation are their own semiotic system. A smiling emoji often softens a directive. Repeated exclamation points can indicate warmth or performative excitement depending on prior style. Use small tests to validate interpretations. Send a clarifying question and note latency and tone change. In asynchronous collaboration, commit to explicit communication norms to reduce misreading. Define expected reply windows, preferred channels for different message types, and a simple status protocol for workload peaks. These rules turn some ambiguous cues into reliable signals by reducing variance. Another digital phenomenon is curated persona. People carefully craft profiles and posts that emphasize desirable attributes. Reading online, therefore, requires skepticism. Treat public posts as intentionally polished and infer more from interaction patterns, who they engage with, what they comment on, and how consistent their stated values are with private exchanges. Chapter 15, Negotiation and Persuasion. Applying people. Reading to influence outcomes. Negotiation is conversation engineered toward an outcome. The better you read the other party, the more ethically effective your influence becomes. This chapter positions behavioral reading as a preparatory and in-the-moment tool in negotiation, helpful for calibrating offers, detecting resistance, and creating joint value, while stressing that reading never substitutes for principled strategy. Chapter 16, Building and Repairing. Trust detection, repair, and reinforcement. Trust is fragile but malleable. It is both inferred from behavior and actively constructed through predictable, safety-enhancing actions. This chapter provides a playbook for detecting trust erosion early, repairing breaches with integrity, and reinforcing trust behaviors so relationships remain resilient. Detection starts with baseline monitoring. Track small signals that cumulatively indicate trust shifts, declining responsiveness, increased boundary setting, fewer voluntary updates, or a change in language from we to eye. These are early warning signs that merit inquiry rather than accusation. Use curiosity as a primary repair tool. Open with a benign observation and an invitation to co-diagnose. I've noticed fewer updates this month. Is there something about our process that's not working for you? This non-judgmental stance reduces defensive reflexes and invites collaborative problem-solving. When a breach occurs, missed commitments, perceived dishonesty, or emotional injury, apply a structured repair sequence. Acknowledge the event plainly, take responsibility for your role without over-justifying, offer a sincere apology tied to concrete corrective steps, and propose a small, verifiable action to rebuild credibility. Action is the currency of repair. Words must be paired with demonstrable changes. Design micro-re-engagements that are low risk and high signal, short, reliable commitments that re-establish predictability. Regularly report on progress in a transparent way so the other party has data to re-evaluate trust incrementally. Prevention is equally important. Institutionalize trust hygiene, clear agreements, shared documentation, and predictable rhythms for feedback, so relationships are designed to surface friction early rather than letting it fester. Reinforcement practices amplify trust when it exists, show gratitude for reliability, publicly credit collaborators for delivered value, and build rituals of mutual recognition. Social proof matters. When others consistently observe cooperative behavior, trust becomes reputational and spreads beyond dyads. In teams, formalize a miss and repair norm where failures are destigmatized if promptly reported and remediated. This cultural approach reduces cover-ups and accelerates organizational learning. Chapter 17. Teaching the skill, curriculum, practice, and assessment for reading. People talent in reading people can be taught. The process requires scaffolding, repetitive practice, and honest feedback loops. This chapter outlines a curriculum for training individuals or teams to develop calibrated observational skills while maintaining ethical standards. Start with foundational literacy. Teach basic signal categories, facial micro-expressions, posture, vocal markers, gesture families, and the three-stage inference loop: observe, cluster, test. Use multimodal inputs, short video clips for micro-expression drills, audio-only exercises for vocal sensitivity, and live role plays for turn-taking and rhythm. Emphasize baseline building. Trainees must learn to establish a person's typical behaviors before making strong inferences. Practice should be frequent and incremental. Daily 5 to 10-minute observation tasks accumulate skill rapidly. Incorporate structured feedback, video review with time-stamped notes, peer debriefs that compare hypotheses to outcomes, and a coach-led calibration session where trainees contrast interpretations and learn error patterns. Assessment focuses on probabilistic accuracy rather than binary right-wrong. Use scoring systems that reward cautious, evidence-based hypotheses and penalize overconfident leaps. Include ethics modules, consent, privacy, and repair, so trainees internalize boundaries. Advanced training includes scenario work, negotiation simulations, crisis interviews, and cross-cultural interactions with expert debriefs. Encourage metacognition. Trainees should log their confidence levels and update them based on feedback to calibrate self-assessment. For organizations, create a culture of continuous learning, maintain an observation archive, host regular calibration workshops, and reward accurate, humble readers who use insights to support rather than exploit colleagues. Finally, institutionalize accountability. Ensure reading skills are applied to improve outcomes, better hiring, safer debriefs, more effective negotiations, and are subject to ethical oversight. Teaching reading is not about creating lie-detecting wizards. It is about cultivating disciplined observers who use insights to enhance communication, safety, and mutual understanding. Chapter 18. Mastery and Integration. A practical routine for lifelong calibration. Mastery in reading people is iterative and modest. It requires a daily routine of observation, reflection, and recalibration that keeps your skill responsive to new contexts and resistant to hubris. This chapter offers a practical, repeatable integration practice you can adopt, a 5-step daily calibration ritual followed by monthly synthesis. The daily ritual lasts 20 minutes and consists of focused observation, 10 minutes, watching a conversation or short video, and noting neutral facts. Hypothesis writing, 5 minutes, clustering cues and stating a tentative hypothesis. Gentle testing, either a low-risk question in the next interaction or a mental simulation, and rapid feedback logging, 5 minutes, recording outcome and refining confidence. Doing this consistently builds pattern recognition and humility. Complement daily work with a weekly review. Analyze 3 cases where your reading was off and 3 where it was right. Extract what differentiated them and adjust your mental models. Monthly synthesis formalizes learning. Update your personal reading map with new rules, cultural calibrations, and personal biases to watch. Maintain a short list of common errors, projection, halo effect, and over-reliance on single cues, and track how often they occur to measure growth. Mastery also demands diversity of exposure. Read across cultures, age groups, and contexts to avoid narrow heuristics that fail in novel settings. Commit to at least 1 cross-cultural immersion or structured role-play per quarter, and seek external calibration from mentors or peers. Ethically integrate reading into life by committing to consent-based application. Use insights to ask supportive questions, design safer environments, and facilitate better outcomes rather than to manipulate or judge. Finally, cultivate psychological humility. Keep a short calibration checklist before making consequential inferences. Have I established a baseline? Are there plausible, non-threatening explanations? Can I test this with a low-risk question? When you habitually practice observation, test hypotheses, and update models, reading people becomes less like fortune-telling and more like disciplined craftsmanship, a lifelong practice that deepens empathy, sharpens judgment, and makes human connection more accurate and generous. Chapter 19. Reading under pressure. High stakes, contexts, and team-based calibration. Reading people under pressure. During an interview, a medical diagnosis conversation, a legal deposition, a crisis negotiation, or a diplomatic exchange requires a different protocol than casual social observation because the costs of error rise and the emotional stakes are magnified. This chapter gives you a disciplined, ethically grounded playbook for applying observational skill in those settings and for sharing responsibility through team-based calibration, so single reader bias doesn't become catastrophic. The first principle is humility. In high-stakes contexts, treat every inference as provisional and prioritize verifiability over conviction. Before you use any behavioral reading, clarify what decision it will inform and whether alternative, objective sources are available. For example, in hiring, combine behavioral reads with structured interviews, task-based assessments, and reference checks. In medicine, pair observed effect with clinical tests and patient history. In negotiation, use behavior to generate questions, not to issue accusations. Chapter 20. The Reader's Life, Stewardship, Growth, and the Limits of Skill. Mastering the art of reading people is not an endpoint. It's an ongoing relationship with complexity that demands self-care, stewardship, and an ethical frame. This final chapter reframes the skill as a way of living well among others, one that enlarges empathy, clarifies leadership, and deepens intimacy when practiced with boundaries and humility, and it warns of common pitfalls, arrogance, voyeurism, and emotional exhaustion. Begin with personal stewardship. Maintain psychological hygiene through reflection, supervision, and regular pauses. Skilled readers are continually exposed to other people's emotional states. Without containment, this exposure accumulates into compassion, fatigue. Develop steady rituals, daily debrief notes that separate observation from interpretation, weekly supervision with a trusted peer to process ambiguous or distressing cases, and deliberate recovery activities, physical movement, nature time, creative outlets that reset your emotional baseline. Second, practice ethical boundary setting. Decide in advance which contexts you will apply reading skills and which are off limits.